6 months ago, I walked out of my office carrying nothing but a cardboard box, $43 in my checking account, and a termination letter that said my position had been eliminated. That was the official reason. The real reason was standing behind the conference room table, wearing a $1,200 suit and pretending not to enjoy watching my life fall apart. His name was Richard Coleman. He was my boss, and he thought he'd won. If he had simply fired me, maybe this story would have ended differently. But he wanted everyone to watch. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted me to remember that morning for the rest of my life. Trust me, I do. It was December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas. The office looked like something out of a holiday movie. Red ribbons hung from every cubicle. Christmas music floated through the hallways. Someone had placed a giant tree in the lobby, covered with gold ornaments and fake snow. Everyone smiled. Everyone laughed. Everyone pretended everything was perfect. I had worked at Coleman Technologies for almost 9 years. I wasn't the loudest employee. I wasn't the favorite. I was simply the guy who solved problems nobody else could solve. When servers crashed, they called me. When million-dollar clients threatened to leave, they called me. When deadlines became impossible, they called me. I missed birthdays, skipped vacations, canceled anniversaries. My wife used to joke that the company saw me more than she did. Back then, it sounded funny. Now I realize it wasn't a joke. That Thursday morning I arrived early as usual. Coffee in one hand, laptop in the other. Everything felt normal, until I noticed people avoiding eye contact. My friend Marcus walked past my desk without saying good morning. Emily from accounting looked at me, then quickly looked away. Something was wrong. 5 minutes later my phone rang. "Richard wants to see you." No explanation. No warning. Just those 5 words. I remember taking a deep breath before knocking on his office door. Inside sat Richard, the HR director, and a woman I had never seen before. That's when I knew. Nobody schedules surprise meetings with HR 3 days before Christmas unless someone's life is about to change. Richard folded his hands and smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile people wear when they already know the outcome. "Daniel," he said, "please have a seat." I stayed standing. He slid a white envelope across the table. "We've decided to restructure the company." Restructure. Corporate language has a funny way of hiding ugly truths. Layoffs become restructuring. Lies become strategy. Betrayal becomes business. I opened the envelope. My hands didn't shake, not yet. "This can't be right," I said quietly. Richard leaned back. "I'm afraid the decision is final." 9 years. Gone in less than 30 seconds. I asked the question everyone asks. Why me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at the HR director. She stared at the table. Richard finally shrugged. "We're moving in a different direction." Different direction? Funny. Because just 2 weeks earlier, he'd publicly praised me for saving the company's biggest client. Now suddenly, I no longer fit the direction. I looked directly into his eyes. "Is this really about restructuring?" For the first time, his smile disappeared. Only for a second. Then it came back. "You'll receive 8 weeks of severance." 8 weeks, after giving them nearly a decade of my life. I wanted to argue. I wanted to yell. Instead, I nodded, because something felt off. Richard wasn't just firing me. He was hiding something. As I packed my desk, the office grew strangely quiet. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody wished me luck. Most people kept pretending to work. Not because they didn't care, because they were afraid. Afraid they'd be next. Afraid speaking to me might somehow make them a target too. Then something happened I didn't notice until much later. Marcus slipped a folded sticky note into my box. He didn't say a word, just walked away. I didn't read it until I got home. It contained only one sentence. "You weren't fired because of budget cuts. Check Project Atlas." That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just 4 words that would completely change my life. At first, I had no idea what Project Atlas even was. Then I remembered. Atlas wasn't public. It was the company's most secret internal project. Only a handful of people had access, including me. I opened my laptop that night, hoping I still had some old notes. Instead, I discovered something far more disturbing. Every file connected to Project Atlas had disappeared, not deleted, erased, as if they had never existed. Someone wasn't just trying to fire me. Someone was trying to erase me. And the more I thought about it, the more one question kept repeating in my mind. If I was only another employee, why did someone go through so much effort to make me disappear? That night I barely slept. Not because I'd lost my job. I'd survived hard times before. What kept me awake was Marcus's note. "Check Project Atlas." Those 3 words replayed in my head over and over. By sunrise, I had convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe Atlas had simply been renamed. Maybe the files had been archived. Or maybe I was chasing ghosts because I couldn't accept being fired. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. He never called. Especially not on a Saturday. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Daniel, don't ask questions. Just meet me." "Where?" "The diner on Lincoln Avenue." 30 minutes. Then he hung up. No goodbye. No explanation. That wasn't like Marcus. When I arrived, he was already sitting in the back corner, constantly checking the windows as if someone was watching him. I'd known Marcus for 7 years. I'd never seen him nervous. Until now. He pushed a flash drive across the table. "You didn't get this from me." I looked at the tiny USB drive. "What's on it?" "The real reason you were fired." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. Marcus didn't smile. "You think Richard fired you because of restructuring?" He leaned closer. "He fired you because you were asking the right questions." My stomach tightened. "What questions?" "Project Atlas." The waitress walked by and Marcus immediately stopped talking. He waited until she disappeared before continuing. Atlas wasn't just another software project. It was an acquisition. I frowned. "What acquisition?" He looked around one more time. Our company wasn't building new technology. We were stealing it. For a second, I honestly thought he'd lost his mind. Coleman Technologies was one of the fastest growing cybersecurity companies in the country. We had investors, audits, government contracts. Companies like that don't steal, right? Marcus slid the flash drive toward me again. "Open it when you're alone." "What am I looking for?" "Emails, financial records, and one recording." My heart skipped. "What recording?" Marcus swallowed hard. "The meeting where Richard decided you had to go." I stared at him. "You recorded it?" He shook his head. "No. Someone else did." "Who?" "I don't know." That answer bothered me more than anything else. If someone inside the company was secretly recording executive meetings, this was much bigger than I realized. Before leaving, Marcus grabbed my arm. "One more thing. If anyone asks, we never met." Then he walked away without looking back. The moment I got home, I plugged the flash drive into my old laptop. Hundreds of files appeared. Emails, contracts, internal presentations, expense reports. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I found a folder labeled Atlas, Confidential. Inside were dozens of documents showing that Coleman Technologies had been quietly buying struggling startups. Officially, everything looked legal, until I noticed something strange. Every company they bought had filed for bankruptcy just weeks before the acquisition. Every single one. Too many coincidences. Then I opened another spreadsheet. My blood ran cold. The bankruptcies weren't natural. Someone had deliberately destroyed those businesses before buying them for pennies. Fake lawsuits, anonymous cyber attacks, leaked customer data, stock manipulation. Each attack happened just before Coleman stepped in as the hero. It was brilliant and completely illegal. Suddenly, Richard's smile during my termination meeting made sense. He wasn't protecting the company. He was protecting himself. Then I found the audio recording. I hesitated before pressing play. Static filled the speakers. Then voices. Richard's voice. Another executive. The HR director. Someone I didn't recognize. Richard spoke first. "Daniel knows too much." Silence, another voice answered. "He hasn't figured it out yet." Richard laughed. "He will. So we remove him now." The HR director sounded uncomfortable. "What if he sues?" Richard answered immediately. "He won't. He still believes loyalty matters." Everyone laughed, every single one of them. I sat frozen. 9 years. 9 years of weekends, late nights, missed holidays. And to them, I was just a problem to eliminate. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Unknown voice. "What if Daniel kept copies?" Richard replied, "He didn't. He trusts us." Another round of laughter. I paused the recording. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger, because Richard was wrong. I had trusted them, and that had been my biggest mistake. 3 days later, something unexpected happened. An email arrived from an address I'd never seen before. No subject, only one sentence. "They're watching Marcus now. Stop contacting him." Attached was a photograph. Marcus leaving his apartment. Across the street, a black SUV, 2 men inside, watching. I zoomed in. One of the men looked familiar, very familiar. Then it hit me. He wasn't company security. He used to work for the FBI. Richard hadn't just fired me. He had hired professionals to keep people quiet. That's when I realized something terrifying. If they were watching Marcus, they were probably watching me too. I walked to my living room window. Parked across the street, a dark sedan I'd never noticed before. Its engine was running, the driver never looked up, never moved, just waited, for the first time since losing my job. Wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about survival, because whatever Project Atlas really was, people were willing to destroy lives, to keep it buried. Close the curtains without taking my eyes off the black sedan. Maybe it wasn't there for me. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor. Maybe I was letting fear turn every shadow into a threat. Then the driver's phone lit up. He looked directly at my house. A second later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without speaking. A calm voice said, "Curiosity can be expensive, Daniel." Click, the line went dead. My pulse spiked. Whoever they were, they wanted me to know one thing. They knew where I lived. I didn't stay another minute. I grabbed my laptop, the flash drive, a backpack, and drove to the only place I knew they wouldn't think to look, my grandfather's old cabin. It had been empty for years. Hidden deep in the mountains, with almost no cell service. For the first time in days, I could think. I spread every document across the kitchen table. Emails, financial records, contracts, audio, transcripts. One question kept bothering me. If Richard had gone through all this trouble to get rid of me, why hadn't he simply deleted everything? Then I noticed something strange. One of the contracts had a tiny handwritten note in the corner. See Appendix K? There was only one problem. Appendix K didn't exist. At least, not in any of the files I had. Someone had removed it, which meant somewhere, the original copy still existed. The next morning my phone buzzed. No greeting, no signature, just one line. The original files are in storage room C, basement level 2. Attached was a digital access badge, temporary, valid for exactly 30 minutes. I stared at the screen. It had to be a trap, but if it wasn't, this might be my only chance. That night, I parked 3 blocks away from Coleman Technologies. The building looked exactly the same. The same glowing logo, the same security lights, the same place where I'd spent nearly a decade of my life. Only now, I felt like a stranger. I slipped through the employee entrance using the temporary badge. The scanner flashed green. Access granted. Whoever sent it still had access inside the company. The basement was almost silent. Rows of storage rooms stretched down a narrow hallway. Storage room C. The lock clicked open. Inside were shelves filled with old file boxes. Nothing looked unusual until I found a gray archive box with one word printed across the side. Atlas. I opened it. My heart nearly stopped. Original contracts, internal audits, investor reports, and at the very bottom, Appendix K. I unfolded the document. It wasn't a technical report. It was a list of names, judges, consultants, politicians, investment firms. Every name had a number beside it. Millions of dollars, bribes. This wasn't corporate fraud anymore. It was organized corruption. The kind of corruption that could destroy billion-dollar companies and send powerful people to prison. Suddenly, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming toward me. I held my breath. Another step. Closer. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Then a voice. "I was wondering if you'd come back." Richard. I stayed hidden behind the shelves. He laughed softly. "You always were predictable." Another flashlight appeared. Then another. 3 people searching. "I know you're here, Daniel." His voice echoed through the basement. "You should have accepted the severance." I quietly slipped the documents into my backpack. Every movement felt impossibly loud. One wrong step, and it was over. A flashlight swept inches from my face. I froze. The beam moved on. Richard sighed. "You know what your biggest problem is? You still think the truth matters." He paused. "In this world, the people with money decide what the truth is." I had spent years respecting this man, believing he had earned everything. Now I finally saw him for who he really was. Not a leader, not a businessman, just a coward hiding behind expensive lawyers and powerful friends. I waited until the footsteps moved deeper into the room. Then I quietly slipped out through the emergency exit. The cold night air hit my face. I ran, didn't stop, didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, I realized something. I finally had proof, real proof. Enough to expose everything, but exposing it wouldn't be enough. Richard had too much influence, too many connections. He'd bury the evidence, buy silence, blame someone else. No, if I wanted justice, I couldn't just destroy Richard. I had to take away the one thing he loved more than money: control. And for the first time since I was fired, I finally had a plan so unexpected, Richard Coleman would never see it coming. The next morning, I didn't call the police. I didn't contact the media, and I definitely didn't confront Richard. That's exactly what he expected me to do. Instead, I disappeared. For the next 6 months, nobody heard from me. Not my former coworkers, not Richard, not even Marcus. People assumed I'd given up. Some probably thought I'd left the country. Richard certainly believed the problem had solved itself. He was wrong, because while he was busy celebrating, I was learning. I spent every day studying corporate finance, mergers, hostile takeovers, and investment law. I met with attorneys who specialized in white-collar crime, not to file a lawsuit, but to understand exactly where Richard had crossed the line. Then I reached out to something Richard never expected. The founders of the startups Coleman Technologies had destroyed. At first, no one trusted me. Why would they? I had worked for the company that ruined their lives. But I showed them the documents, Appendix K, the financial records, the audio recording, one by one. Their anger turned into determination. Then something incredible happened. A venture capital firm contacted me. One of their partners had quietly been investigating Coleman Technologies for months. They had suspected financial manipulation but never had enough evidence. Now, they did. The partner looked at me across the conference table and asked one question. If everything you're saying is true, what do you want? I didn't hesitate. I don't want a settlement. I want the company. He smiled. Good answer. Over the next few months, Coleman Technologies began to collapse from the inside. Not because of rumors, because of facts. Major investors quietly started selling their shares. Banks became nervous. Government auditors requested documents. Several executives suddenly resigned. Richard went on television insisting everything was under control. It wasn't. The company's stock kept falling. Every week, lower and lower. Then came the final blow. Federal investigators executed search warrants at company headquarters. News helicopters circled the building all day. Every major business network covered the story. The headline was everywhere. Coleman Technologies under federal investigation for corporate fraud. Richard denied everything, again, but this time, nobody believed him. 2 weeks later, the venture capital firm made its move. With the stock price in free fall, they bought a controlling interest in the company. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Richard walked into that room expecting to save his position. Instead, he found me sitting at the end of the conference table. For the first time in 6 months, we looked at each other. He actually laughed. You? You think you've won? I calmly slid a folder across the table. Inside was the official board resolution, effective immediately. Richard Coleman was removed as CEO. He flipped through the pages in disbelief. This isn't possible. I looked him straight in the eyes. It already happened. His face turned pale. He looked around the room, searching for support. No one spoke. Not one board member. Not one executive. The same people who had once laughed while I was fired now refused to meet his eyes. Funny how loyalty disappears when power does. Richard stood up. You can't do this. I smiled. I didn't. The board did. Security entered the room, the same security team that had escorted me out 6 months earlier. Their supervisor spoke politely. Mr. Coleman, we need you to come with us. Richard stared at me with pure hatred. This isn't over. I nodded. No, it isn't. As he reached the door, I said one final thing. Richard. He stopped. Without turning around, I asked quietly, do you remember what you told me the day you fired me? Silence. You said the company was moving in a different direction. I let the words hang in the air. It finally did. He walked out without saying another word. A few months later, Richard was indicted on multiple federal charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Several executives accepted plea deals and testified against him. Marcus was cleared of any wrongdoing and became one of the most respected leaders in the rebuilt company. The employees who had stayed silent weren't punished. Fear makes people do things they normally wouldn't. I understood that. As for Coleman Technologies, we changed everything. Every illegal contract was canceled. Employees received fair benefits. Transparency became company policy. For the first time in years, people were proud to work there. Sometimes people ask me if revenge made me happy. The truth? No. Revenge didn't heal the sleepless nights. It didn't give me back the birthdays I missed, or the Christmas my family spent wondering how we'd pay the bills. But justice gave me something revenge never could. Peace. Because in the end, I didn't destroy Richard's life. He destroyed it himself. I simply refused to let him bury the truth. And every now and then, when I walk past the old conference room where I was fired, I remember standing there with nothing but a cardboard box. It's funny how life works. The same door I once walked through as a broken employee, I now walk through as the owner. And every Christmas I leave one empty cardboard box in that conference room. Not to humiliate anyone, just to remind myself. Power is temporary. Character is permanent. So let me ask you this. If you had been in my position, would you have exposed Richard immediately? Or waited 6 months and taken everything he valued instead? Be honest, I want to read your answer in the comments.